Dr. Umar believes that the Black church benefits from single women, single mothers, due to the resources that and time we put into the church when we don't have a husband. So how do you all feel about
You
that?
go first, Mecca. I would love to hear your take.
Absolutely. So I always look at the source. And so I don't know a lot about him. I'm wondering if he is married.
He is not.
So I always look at the source, right? And then the other thing that I will say is that I attend Word of Faith. We've been there for a very long time. Bishop Delcy Bronner. Yes, that's my church. Nina Bronner, First Lady. And they are very big on marriage. The other thing that I do know is that from what I've seen growing up in the church, I think it's a place that actually where they want to see people get married. And also for Black marriage, it's connected to generational wealth. So why would the church not want more couples and more married women in the church? So I feel like it completely goes against what we know is true from financial analysts, financial advisors, is that once you have a married couple, they can actually invest more.
Yeah. And I think consider the source. Lord, that source. The second part of that too is I think there are segments of the Black church. And so the smaller Chitlin Circuit Black churches, 100%. I grew up in those churches where it is 100% predicated on control. So I definitely agree that while they're prophesying you finna get a husband, the other side of that is once you get a husband, that husband is the head. That husband takes control over that woman. That husband does not allow her to invest as much. I get that. And in those smaller churches, those of you who grew up or been in those smaller churches, you know that you have 15 million jobs in that one church, and you give and you sow and you give, and then that's it. Whereas my church, Linked Up Church with Pastor Joe and Christian Gregory, no, not only do we believe heavily in marriage, we believe heavily, number one, just what you can do as a couple, as two people in that marriage, we understand the power of that. And so I disagree, but I do agree if you go to the smaller church segments, which I also think is kind of running out.
So it could be possible in some churches, but it's not 100%, which nothing is.
Just because a man sits in a pulpit does not mean that he does not pray on women or people.
Correct.
And so we have to remember these are people.
Yep.
This is a man or a woman that's been given, that's in a position of power. And so you have to also look at who is the person that you're following.
That,
Honey.
And so there are many pastors that we've seen fall or go on these sabbaticals every year because they have to step out, they step away from the church to something they did inside of the church. And so you have to just be very careful. Character is so important to me, Coriel. Like I look at, does this person have character? I can care less about the person's wealth. What does his character look like?
Welcome back to the channel. You see the information on the screen, so you already know what I'm about. So let's get into it. So this is from Coriel. She just said her name, so now I know how to say it. But this is from her channel. And again, I think it's interesting, like I said, and I think we have to bring this up every once in a while because I do think that there is always this, connection between singleness among Black women, especially, and the church. And I also think that, again, depending upon where people are coming from, they're going to hit it at different angles. And me, the people that have been around me for a while know, kind of how I feel. And I feel like a lot of times people are making their argument and they're doing it really just because of drama. They're trying to build up as much emotional drama in people as they possibly can in order to get people to follow them, like them, all these other types of things. There is an analogy that basically says, there's no such thing as bad publicity because human beings are curious. And so basically when they hear about something, they want to dive into that thing and they want to know more about that thing, even if that thing is not necessarily what they like. And if their emotions get all, tied up in it, then a lot of times there's a lot of money to be made in that. That being said, okay, do I believe that the average Black church they desire, they have this overwhelming push to make Black women single? And the answer to that is no. I don't think that. However, do Black churches put things in place to fix singleness? See, that is what I believe. I don't really care, honestly, if it's a small church or a large church. I find that many churches are either afraid to or they don't desire to put things in place to help singles. Now, what's interesting is that both of these ladies have mentioned churches here in Atlanta, which means that Coriel is probably here in Atlanta because Linked Up and also Word of Faith are here in Atlanta. And I've been to both churches, to be honest with you. And I have, kind of looked around at different things like that. And I could definitely say, again, not so much in the depth of the church. I haven't been to the depth. I didn't go to these churches like 6 months to a year to really understand, what they were doing. So I can't say it from that perspective. But I can say from the perspective of, again, a lot of churches, they just don't push a singles ministry. They just don't. And I honestly think that is because a lot of people are afraid of it. Like I've told you all before, about 20% of men are true, what we would consider heavy duty chasers. All right. And again, these words always get hijacked. But when you're starting to talk about the guy that will pretty much go up to any woman, that will talk to any woman, that is a woman's next to him, and women might say that that's confidence, but it's really not confidence. But I don't have time to really go into it. All I can say is that most of these men, they're not doing it because of confidence. They're just doing it because this is what they've practiced. All right. And this is also why a lot of women don't get calls after they've given their number. So, for the women that understand that, now you know. Okay, so this is not really confidence that these men have. They're just used to being around men. They see a woman, they're just going to talk to her. They're going to get a number. That's just how they are. That's about 20% of men. All right. And then you have 20% of men, like I told you, that are losers. Okay, they're never going to do anything. They're just going to sit there. They're going to sit there, watch porn, and that's going to be their life. And then the other 60%, that's where your husband is. All right. That's where your husband is. These are what we consider the really great men. Okay, the men that'll go out there, they'll get the job, they'll take care of you, they want to be there for you. They're not, they might cheat on you, but more than likely they're not. And these are the men. But these men don't talk to every woman. They're not that type of people. They don't have that personality. All right. And so what happens is if you don't foster an environment, okay, where these men and women can come together, what happens is this 20%, they just run through everybody. I mean, and I'm not saying they always are having sex with them, but they're dating them and they're always always talking to every woman in the church. And if they create a singles ministry, they're the very first men that will sign up, to go and at least look at who are the single women, in that environment, because that's just what they do. Right. And unfortunately, the personality that runs those types of men many times is actually in the pastor. So a lot of pastors believe that most men are like this. They truly believe that. Like I've done a couple of videos recently and I was talking about perspective. And there's one guy was pretty much talking about that every man out here wants a nurturing woman. He was just saying, I believe that every man wants a nurturing woman. So if a woman is nurturing, she's going to be able to find these really great men. And even in this man's comments, when he was putting that up, all the women were disagreeing with him. Why? Because not every man wants a nurturing woman. And just as we understand that, we have to understand that when a man is a pastor and he's walking in power, and let me just let you know that every single man that is on that stage, unless God has come to him and told him, I want you 100% to be on that stage. And you might say, well, yeah, that's how they was called and stuff like that. Well, you have men that run away from that calling. Okay, they 100% run away from that calling because there's something about a man and a woman when they get up there and they move in that environment, okay, they kind of like it a little bit. Okay, they kind of do. And it is a little bit of a power thing. It is a little bit of, I like being in this environment. And not all men that are in that environment, like I said, have that desire where they can go out and they just talk to every woman and different things like that. But a lot of them do. So again, these men, they don't understand why the men in the audience are not just talking to every woman. They don't understand it. They don't get it. It doesn't compute for them. Because that's not how they themselves work. And one of the problems with all of us is it's hard for us to see life through someone else's lens. But it's like I've told you, and the old school pimps, back in the day would tell you, is that you don't talk to the person in front of you. You talk to the little girl or the little boy inside. And for every 35-year-old man that's 6'5", there's still a little boy inside of him. And that little boy, if he was insecure, or if he had problems, or he was worried about something, or if he was going through something, or he might have been the nerd, or whatever it was, okay, when he was 12, it doesn't matter if he's 35. That's still the person you're talking to. That's still the person that you're dealing with. And see, a lot of women don't quite understand this, and this is why there's so many problems out here. And when we don't look at someone's pain and handle their pain well, what happens is you create a monster in that other person, because now they get filled with anger because you didn't appreciate them and you did not understand them. But anyway, that's going down another path. So what you're dealing with here is you're dealing with situations, okay, where these churches are up here and they believe that it's just going to happen organically. It's going to happen on their own. They figure, hey, it happened for me on my own, so why won't it happen for the congregation? Okay, so that's part of it. Then you have, like she said, the smaller churches, the churches where these men are really literally just walking narcissists that just happen to be in the pulpit. And so these men want to fully control their situations. But again, I think in our modern society, that's few and far between. The truth of the matter is a church will do better if that church can recruit men, keep men, and if those men are married. You'll make more money, and from a church perspective, you're going to get a much better result. People think twice, even coming into a church, even thinking about violence, when there's lots and lots of men. Okay, because now the men become very zealous about their church, and they're going to protect their church. Men, generally speaking, make more money than women. Okay, so now if the men are paying tithe, the church is going to make more money. It does not behoove the church at all for, people to be single. However, and that's what I was leaning to before, there is a social problem, because if a woman is in the church and she meets a man in the church, and this man dates her, and maybe on the second date they have sex or something like that, and then now he decides, okay, well, I wasn't really feeling you, thanks for the sex, and now he's gone. And then now she feels violated. She feels like, okay, I gave him something, okay, and now she's angry. And so she's looking for something to lash out at. So now if she met him through a singles group, she starts to complain in the singles group. And she wants to basically sue the church. She wants to get mad at the church. She wants to get mad at the singles group. And honestly, I believe that is where most of the problem is. Okay? Because that is that concern. That's that worry. The church is afraid. God told us several times throughout the Bible, do not walk in fear. Be courageous. Those were the words that he told Joshua, okay, when they were going to go into the promised land. So God wants us to be humble unto him, but to be courageous when it comes to everything else. We see that with David when he took on Goliath. He had a courageous spirit about himself. He was not going to be worried about even this man who stood twice his height, was big and huge. He was like, I can take him if God is with me. And the modern church says that they're following God, but they do not have the courage of God within them. Instead, what they're trying to do is they're trying to dodge and weave through problems instead of being 100% sold out on what God is doing. So now, how do you deal with it? Well, the problem, like I said, is not just in the fact that we need more singles groups in the church. We also need to understand what the real problem is. For many of you that are new to the channel, you might not know that, I help to run two groups, which is really the same group. It's just one group, caters to people who are a little older, and one group, caters to people who are a little bit younger, and that is Christian Singles Connect and Christian Millennials Connect. All right. And Christian Singles Connect is primarily for those 40 and up, and Millennials Connect is 40 and down. Okay. And you see the information on the screen. So please, if you want, go out, sign up. You'll get more information. We are located here in Atlanta, but like I said, we do things for people all over the world, literally all over the world, like through this channel and other things like that. That being said, when we have an event, okay, a major event, one of the things that we try to do, depending upon the event, it has to be depending upon the event. But one of the things that we try to do is we try to break people up from their gender groups. So what does this mean? Like the literal last event that we had was a Christmas event. And at this particular event, as people start to file in, come into, the actual event, those of us that were, evidently organizers, we kind of huddled together in our group because, we know each other very well. And so we started to hang out. And as some of the new people started to come in, especially those that, like I said, didn't know anybody or they knew very few people, they might do something like grab their food or grab a drink or whatever it is, but then they would go to a table and then they would sit down. And one of the first things that they do is they separate themselves by gender. So what ends up happening is you have women on one side of the room and you have men on the other side of the room. And see, most churches and most singles groups are not going to do anything about that. They're just going to let that happen. Okay, over and over again, they're going to let that happen. But one of the things that we try to do in Christian Singles Connect and Christian Millennials Connect is force people to mix that up. So like, right, we might put people on teams and we do the whole girl, boy method to get more of the women to talk to the men and the men to talk to the women. And you might be thinking to yourself, man, that's crazy, dude. You're talking to people generally over 25. Why in the world do you still have to play that game? And that's what I'm trying to tell you. No matter what the situation is, when I understand this about people, when you are around a man, you're really dealing with the 12 to 13-year-old inside. And when you're around a woman, you're dealing with the 12 or 13-year-old inside. So yes, they're acting as though they're in middle school. No matter how old they get, they're still basically old middle schoolers. And we might not necessarily like that, but that's the behavior that you're going to get from the average person. And so some women right now might be thinking, well, I want that guy that walks around and he talks to all the women and stuff like that. Well, I call that social confidence. And the reason why I do not encourage women to date those men is because those generally are the men that people would call Pookie and what I call Raymond, which is the high value version of Pookie. See, those men understand women and they spent a lot of time understanding women. And because of that, they've had a lot of play. They get a lot of women. They talk to a lot of women. They date a lot of women. And they also have sex with a lot of women. So these men generally are not going to connect to you as quickly. And they also will generally leave you with more problems. And a lot of times they will not marry you because they don't care about you like that. So the men who are in the middle, those are the ones that are more stable. Many of them have great jobs. Many of them are great people. And let's be honest, most women are in the middle. So those are the ones that you really line up with the most. And so it makes more sense, okay, to get those two groups together. And we can play around and we can jump through hoops and we can say, well, we're not like that. But in reality, that's what's going on. And so when we sit around and we talk about the church is oblivious. And the church honestly doesn't care. And that is not, in my opinion, okay, good enough. When you have a situation where 70% of the African American people, okay, are not married, which is a crazy number to me, that the fact that the black church is not doing everything it can, that it doesn't spend at least 50% of its resources on fixing that problem, is literally the biggest problem that the black church could ever do. When I run into a church, I'll be honest with you, I don't care who they are. If they're not spending 50% of their resources to fix the marriage problem, to me, that is a church that I don't understand how they can say that they love God. I don't understand how they can say that they love people. I don't understand how they can say that they are on the full mission of God. I just don't. Because everything goes back to marriage. When you have problems with children, it goes back to marriage. When you have half of these suicide rates and different things like that, it goes back to marriage. When you look at crime, it goes back to marriage. In fact, when you look at every single thing that's in the 10 Commandments and a good portion of the problems that are in the Bible, it goes back to marriage. It goes back to environments that aren't stable. It goes back to women who are not secure because they don't know if this man is going in and out of their life. You're dealing with loneliness, which is, to me, is at an epidemic level. Okay. And then you get to this point where every human being is just trying to use another human being. Okay. So to me, if a church is not putting in major time and effort and energy into fixing this problem, the church simply doesn't care. And at that point, that's also saying that the church does not care about its congregation. And that's my problem with this whole singleness that the church is allowing to happen, is not pushing into. And we also have to understand that the church at its core is still an entity. It's an entity. I mean, we have to think about it. Like I've told you all before, even when I put, my own videos out here, I think about, okay, how am I going to do this? How am I going to set this up? What kind of video am I going to use? And it's frustrating to me because I always feel like I'm in that place where I don't know if I want to push this, if this is really bringing glory to God or whatever I'm doing, because I'm like, I also in the back of my mind, I'm like, I want to try to get more followers. I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to do that. Right. And that's what the church is thinking. So the church is thinking, man, we need to have some really great preaching. We need to get these people in the seats. We need to have this good music. We need to, liven it up. The church is not thinking, hey, people are going to come out because we're going to have some sermons on singleness and sermons on how to get people married. They don't think that that's going to put people in the seats. And then even if they do bring people in to put people in the seats for something like that, it's like a lot of, I'll be honest with male pastors, men pastors, don't know how to talk to the congregation. They naturally want to protect the women. And by doing that, they demonize the men. And when you demonize men aren't going to show up. No human being wants to constantly be in an environment where somebody is saying, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And that's why, again, most places online are very polarized. Because, and I've tried to teach you all this, one of the things that happens on a lot of channels is that they demonize someone. It's not always the genders, but they demonize. A lot of, men that talk to women and are trying to teach them how to date, they will demonize other men. A lot of women that are teaching women how to date men will demonize men. You'll have people that are trying to teach men that demonize women. No matter what the situation is, you see it all over the internet. Why? Because they're talking to the pain, and they know that pain will get you riled up. But at the same time, when you're dealing with the church, how do you deal with that? Because if a woman's looking for a godly man, and now you encourage all the godly men to leave the church, now you're left with a whole lot of women that are even more frustrated than when they were there before. And all that talking and preaching and acting like men are evil and not ever listening to the men on their side, again, that causes resentment, that causes pain, and now people are on the internet talking about their pain. So at the end of the day, is the church trying to keep women single? I don't necessarily believe that it's a direct thing that they're trying to do. It is, but it is something that they are doing, whether they recognize it or not. And I believe that women and men have to teach these pastors, have to talk to their pastors, have to try to let them know, like, hey, what you doing? You got us out here hanging around and there's no place for us to go. And that's why, like I say, in Christian Singles Connect, that's why it actually exists. So if you're here in Atlanta, please join Christian Singles Connect or Christian Millennials Connect. We also want to do activities, like I say, all over the world. We used to have, branches in both Charlotte, Birmingham, and New York. We're now consolidating, and we're trying to do it in a slightly different way. But, it's like I told you, even when it comes to the dating, because we're going to be doing some more dating events, and we'll be doing those live on this channel, and that information is down below. But even with that, okay, my concept is always to try to put things in place to get you married. But just bringing people together is not necessarily going to solve that problem. And that is what the church has to understand at its core level. Anyway, please like, please subscribe, hit that bell so you'll be notified when we are doing activities. And I will see you in the very next video.